welcome to this joint webinar between CIWEM, Chartered Institute of Water and Environment Management, and ADEPT, the Association of Directors of Environment, Economy, Planning and Transport. I'm Anne Carruthers. I'm the President of ADEPT this year, and I'm also a Director at Leicestershire County Council. I'd like to do just a bit of housekeeping before we start, if that's all right. So if we could just whip on to the next slide. We are recording the webinar, and the good news is all the speakers have agreed to sharing the recording afterwards, so it will go on the CIWEM website and YouTube, so that's positive then. So if people miss it, they can access it on the website. Any technical issues, and as Barbara's put in the chat, please put it in the chat and raise your hand and we'll do our best to help you. And the key point today is if you've got questions for our presenters at the panel discussion at the end, please put it in the Q&A section, not the chat. That allows us to record it. For future. So you'll see the tab at the bottom, Q&A, please put your questions on there, not in the chat. And good news is, on our CPD there, no certificate, but it still is attributable as an our CPD. So reminder, keep on questions in the Q&A. Thank you for that. Okay then, I think if we move on, yeah. So, as you know, we're dealing with the impacts of climate change, every day, aren't we, across all of our areas. So the understanding of the role, the critical role of placemaking and building resilient and sustainable communities is going to be key to helping us address that. Coincidentally, this year, ADEPT and CIWEM have aligned on the presidential themes around resilience. For my presidential year, my theme has been around the importance of building resilience for systems, organisations, particularly local government, and communities. Hannah Burgess, who you'll meet in a couple of minutes, is president of CIWEM, has the theme of the ripple effect, scaling up resilience and adapting at pace to climate change. So really opportune for us to come together and have this discussion today. And I'm really pleased that we'll hear from water and environmental management experts and from local authority place leaders and how they're tackling the challenge of adapting their services and places to build resilient communities. I'm looking forward to stimulating presentations and a really good discussion at the end. So get your questions in that Q&A bit. I'm sure you'll have lots. The format is we'll briefly hear from ADEPT and CIWEM, and then we've got 2 case study presentations. Then we'll have a panel discussion at the end. So we've got lots to go get through. Okay, if we move on then, first up, we've got Hannah Bartram. She's the Chief Executive Officer of ADEPT. She's been doing a brilliant job since 2016 of leading ADEPT, setting our strategic direction and overseeing the delivery of all aspects of our business. And prior to joining ADEPT, she worked with the Environment Agency for over 10 years and the RSPB before that. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you, Anne, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many of you on the call today. So, as Anne says, I'm the Chief Executive of ADEPT. And if you haven't come across ADEPT before, it's the professional membership body that represents directors of environment, economy, planning and transport, a bit of a mouthful. So in shorthand, they're called place directors. And our membership comes from more than 100 county combined and unitary councils across England. We also have corporate partner members who are drawn from the private sector, and some of you on the call today may well work for them actually. And they do bring in a different and valuable perspective to our work, which we really very much welcome. So in terms of what ADEPT members do, so place directors are responsible for providing the day-to-day services we all use, whether it's local roads, emptying your bins, economic regeneration, planning services, green space and access, whilst they're also developing the long-term strategies for to deliver thriving places. And in terms of what ADEPT does, it's a very proactive network that supports its members, develops future place leaders, delivers research, seeks to influence policy, and publishes challenges, papers, and guidance. And a key role of the association is to bring together local authorities and partners, such as CIWEM, to network and learn from each other. So to that end, we also run a number of regional and national subject boards, plus technical working groups. So we believe that a strong economy and a strong environment go hand in hand, and there's plenty of evidence of the economic benefits of climate and environmental ambitions. So in terms of our strategic priorities, we want to see the government prioritising green growth, a place-based approach to climate action where the net zero agenda runs through every strategy, policy and delivery plan, and action taken now to make places more resilient to what is already changing climate. And a particular focus for us at the moment is ensuring that environment and climate outcomes are embedded in the devolution deals, which will emerge over the next few months. But if you're interested in finding out more about what we do and our work, then please do visit the website, which is on the screen, www.adeptnet.org.uk. So today, we're delighted to be co-hosting this webinar with CIWEM to highlight the critical role of placemaking in both building climate resilience, and sustainable communities. And before we move on to our speakers, I'm going to hand over to Hannah Burgess to introduce CIWEM. So yes, you don't want to I don't normally co-present with another Hannah, especially another Hannah B. So I had to say her full name, but over to you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hannah. So to introduce CIWEM then. So I'm the current president of CIWEM, and we are a professional membership organisation. So we have, it's now over 11,500 members, and our members are professionals who work in the water and environmental industry across the world. The majority of our members are based in the UK, but you can see from the world map here, we've got global coverage. And we have membership that ranges from student membership all the way through to very experienced fellow status of membership. You can find out more about that on our website. So what does CIWEM do? So for our members, we provide publications, events, support, etc. We also have a role influencing government policy, pulling together policy position statements and policy papers, informing government committees and influencing government decision making on water and the environment, as well as having a wide range of events that we put on, and that includes a range of events with regional branches, as well as national groups like the Rivers and Coastal Group and the Urban Drainage Group. So that's CIWEM in a nutshell. I could talk about it all day, but you'll be pleased to hear that I'm not going to on this occasion, but come back to me for more any other time. And I'm now going to hand over to Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks, brilliant. Thank you both, Hannah. So that was really good. And we're going to move on then to the first of our case studies. And we're lucky to have Angela Jones with us today. She's Director of Thriving Places at Westmoreland and Furness Council in Cumbria, which was only formed in April 2023, so new organisation coming out of the old Cumbria County Council. Angela has senior leadership experience across place-based services, including climate, flood, coastal risk, nature planning, highways and regeneration. Her council is the responsible body for local nature recovery strategies in Cumbria and the lead authority on the Cumbria Flood Innovation Resilience Programme. Angela's chair of ADEPT's North Board, and she's also vice president, so president next year. Welcome, Angela, and over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Afternoon, everybody. Really delighted to be here. Thank you for the intro, Anne. I'm coming to this presentation through the lens of place. And as a place director, I think it's really important that we understand what place is. And when we're thinking about climate adaptation, how we can adapt and how we create resilient places and services. In ADEPT, we've been considering how we shape the future through good ancestry. So how do we make decisions that prioritise and improve the quality of life for our future generations? In Westmont and Furness, we've got a very clear commitment that our environment should impact on our health, well-being and economy. And together we need to build our resilience to climate change and take action. And as you can see, just at the right-hand side there, the way that we're looking at this through the lens in Westmont and Furness is through the way we travel, the way we live, the way we work, the way we produce energy, the way we protect and enhance nature, and the way we use things. So bear that in mind as I go through my slides in terms of looking at climate adaptation. The other area that we have been looking at as through ADEPT, and I was fortunate to be part of the PACE programme, is actually just thinking about how we advocate the case for place. What is place? A place is for people, are people in places, and it's very complex. It's very complex in terms of the different perspectives on what place is. And when you're making a case, you need to be able to connect. A couple of quotes there from two of our thought leaders who joined us on the PACE programme. And again, climate adaptation should be threaded and of course embedded in everything that we do when we're shaping and designing places. And actually people comes at the heart of what we do. And so in that regard, and it's quite an old report from Professor Michael Marmot, but the sustainable health equity is something that we bear in mind, as is Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, which I think is really also important. And both of these bring a people lens. It isn't growth at all costs. It looks at the bigger picture. And certainly the Sustainable Health Equity report, one of the priorities is to create and develop sustainable places and an economy, and that again is bringing the people through into what we do. How do we make sure it's equitable? I've also just highlighted on the right hand side the MAC hub, which is maximising UK adaptation to climate change, and this is a new hub that's been established. And again, you'll see from the narrative there, and if anyone's been involved in the hub or setting it up, it's again taking action to protect people's way of life from climate change should drive positive change, multiple benefits, and particularly those that are the most purest and marginalised members of society. So that's just an insight into some of the models that we've looked at through ADEPT and how we focus on a place around people. I wanted to give some examples from West Midlands Furness Council, which is in Cumbria. We became a unitary in 2023. We have Cumberland and West Midlands Furness Council, but we still work across the Cumbria footprint. And one of the things we did quite early, as a new council, was to start considering what the impacts were for Cumbria around climate change. And the data that we've received, probably no surprise in Cumbria, but increasing rainfall, but that is increasing flood risk. Severe gale events, and we've had a few storms in Cumbria, as many have, over the last couple of winters. More intense summer rainfall events, but also wildfire risk as well, where we have drought, where we don't have enough water and drought conditions, and a sea level rise. So as we've been designing our new services in the unitary, we're also thinking about how we adapt those services and design with the climate in mind. It starts with vision, strategies and plans, of course, and we've been developing a number of strategies. And I do think it's really important you have a very clear, coherent vision and strategy. We've got a number that link across climate, as well as the local nature recovery strategy, which Anne referred to, but our local plan, which we're now developing, a new West Midlands Furness local plan, our coastal strategy, our climate action plans, our carbon management strategies. How do all of these fit together? And do we have a really strong thread across those in terms of real clear, consistent vision and themes and priorities that you can, when you read those documents, you can read across them? Coupled with our health and wellbeing strategies and many other strategies which will underpin what we do. We've also been working through CIFRA, which Anne talked about earlier, and this is a funded project. And through the project for CIFRA, we've been undertaking a climate change risk assessment, and that has been funded through the Cumbria Innovation Flood Resilience Project. We've been identifying sectors to undertake some reports, landscape and agriculture here in Cumbria. You wouldn't be surprised at that. Public services and the visitor economy. And from that, we'll develop our own climate adaptation plan, understanding our approach to climate adaptation, how we deliver services, our communities, and we'll be using the data and evidence to develop short, medium and long-term adaptation actions across the council services and working with our partners. A number of other partners have adaptation plans as well. We have 2 national parks up in Cumbria. We're working with both national parks and many other organisations. And again, what you really want is to be able to get a real sense for your place, your area, how all of these plans fit together and align. The innovation programme is 150 million across 25 projects, so, and that's the national programme. Cumbria received 6.6 million over 6 years, and a part of that is to improve flood and coastal risk and climate resilience of small rural communities, traditional flood fences aren't financially viable, so using natural flood measures, but again, working with communities at the heart. We have a Future Coast project, which is another project which is working alongside the coastline, including several sites in Cumbria as well. What it's trying to do is building on our work, strengths and experience within Cumbria, using targeted natural flood management and supporting communities at the heart, working with communities, landowners, farmers, and I think importantly, putting in place monitoring and evaluation to demonstrate effectiveness. Influenced very much by national policy, local policy, and again, that alignment that I've referred to. Doesn't come without the need for collaboration and partnership, and of course political support. As a new council, our council committed very early to put climate and nature as a priority, but it does require collaboration across a number of different partnerships, and I've raised a few of them here. I couldn't list them all, but RAISE is a Cumbria Community Forest, both national parks. We also have Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership, and Borderlands, which has a natural capital theme, as well as other place projects. I wanted to pick out one particular project for two reasons. This is a project which is in Walney, which is off Barrow-in-Furness. It's subject to coastal erosion. It's a really area of concern for us, but it's also an area of natural beauty. It's a project which brings together lots of different organisations, including ArtGene, who are one of our arts sector colleagues, Cumbria Wildlife Trust, Natural England, a Brilliant Barrow. And what this project does is very much around place shaping. It's looking at people, culture and nature and bringing that together in an area which actually has been exposed to climate risk and coastal erosion. We're actually working with the environment, i.e. using our natural asset to create community facilities, cafe, shop, lots of other projects across the town and that area, and encouraging people to use the space and the places on their doorstep, funded through multiple organisations, a real showcase, I suppose, of how we can collaborate and deliver a project which absolutely brings all those themes together. Another example for us as a service is highways, and many of you might be aware of Storm Chain, which has been developed representing state-of-the-art highway asset rapid impact assessments designed to understand the impacts of weather-related hazards, floods particularly, but wildfire, drought. And it provides a situational awareness to allow highways authorities to understand those implications. And we've been taking that further by commissioning a climate study to understand the weather impacts in Cumbria in more detail and understand how our highway services can be shaped in the future, ensuring that we've got accurate forecasting without relying on others, and also developing a very clear flood response plan, providing alert for our bridges and structures. So just two infrastructure examples for you. I think just finally, my place reflections of how we bring all this together. There are definitely challenges across place. It's large scale, complex, requires significant investment, both public and private sector. Acting as an advocate isn't easy. You have to have consistent and shared vision, bringing together all of those plans and strategies with improving quality of life for residents and enabling growth in a sustainable way. There are things which are in direct control, other things which aren't, and you've got stronger influence, working in the partnerships, collaboration and engagement. And I think don't underestimate the importance of data, science, evidence, and AI actually, to absolutely make informed evidence-based decisions when you're designing services with climate adaptation in mind. And finally, goes without saying, invest in that time to develop the partnerships, learning and sharing success. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. I don't think my video has started, but thanks very much, Angela. That was really good. Good to hear from you. Okay, and just a reminder, we've got some questions coming in. For other questions, please stick them in the Q&A. That'll be great. We'll get round to them in our panel discussion at the end. Now I'm going to move on to our second case study, and we're lucky to have Wendy Brooks with us. She's Head of Environment for Norfolk County Council, and she leads a diverse range of services of natural and historic environment, covering protected landscapes, local nature recovery strategy, trails and large ambitious green infrastructure projects, delivering adaptation and resilience. She previously spent 20 years with the Environment Agency, so a real broad range of experience there. Wendy, share with us what you're doing in Norfolk. Welcome.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Anne, and good afternoon, everybody. So just want to, following on from Angela's excellent presentation, I wanted to share with you a couple of case studies of partnerships that Norfolk County Council is involved with, because water is vital to life in Norfolk, to our health and well-being, our environment, to business, economy, including visitor economy and our enjoyment. And we've got all of the water issues: lack of, too much, coastal erosion, flood risk, and poor water quality. And so Norfolk County Council's water priorities are to increase resilience to flooding and coastal erosion, improve water resilience, improve water quality, and to support the prosperity of the environment, businesses and residents of Norfolk. So next slide, please, Kylie. So just in case you didn't know where Norfolk was, oh, I think we've slipped over one. It's there in red. I know not everybody knows where Norfolk is. We're just tucked away in the east, and there's about 2 roads in and out and 1 railway line. So you might not have visited it, but lovely place to come and visit. So next slide, please, Kylie. So the first case study I've got for you is the Norfolk Water Strategy Programme. And this is because Norfolk, as I said, is got all these water issues, but absolutely growing pressures on water resources. Both residents and businesses are already feeling the impacts of a shifting climate through more frequent flooding incidents and water shortages. And the ability of freshwater bodies, of which we've got a lot of in Norfolk, to support biodiversity is under incredible threat, primarily due to pollution and the destruction of habitats. And so the aim of our programme is to tackle these challenges through investing in nature-based solutions and restoring more natural processes within key catchments. And I think we've got a very unique partnership, as you can see on the slide, to work on these challenges. So next slide, please, Kylie. So water security is also impacting our local economy. And this is felt most acutely through the housing sector, where we do have nutrient neutrality, which is around the catchments around the Norfolk Broads, which is a very large national park, and the River Wensum SAC. So we are having to consider how nutrient emissions are offset before any housing can be developed. Also, agriculture, public water supply and industrial water users facing really deep cuts through water abstraction licenses to protect environmental flows. Next slide, please, Kylie. So what we've done is the partnership actually really went away to gather the evidence, to understand what are the issues, what are the water security challenges in Norfolk, and then what could the role of nature-based solutions be in addressing these challenges, and then how might we fund those. So through lots of engagement and evidential studies, we've identified that both water resources and water quality are our initial priorities, although we have considered flooding and physical modifications of water bodies as well. But at the moment, we're looking at water resources and water quality as those priorities. Next slide, please, Kylie. So what we've done is we've gone away, and as I said, there's been an awful lot of modelling and evidence-based work, and what that has actually concluded is we've got a really strong economic case for investing in nature-based solutions. So we estimate that if we're aiming to get a £30 million portfolio of investment for tackling water security, and for every pound invested, that will unlock 6.7 of benefits, pounds of benefits, and that's going to have huge benefits for our wildlife. It will unlock housing, it will have climate and air quality benefits, as well as improved water quality, river quality, and create jobs health, social health and well-being co-benefits. So I think we've got a really good evidence base for doing this, and that's why we've got this programme and partnership. Next slide, please, Kylie. So again, as you can see, and the key message here is that restoring habitats and creating solutions which mimic nature has huge multiple benefits, an opportunity for those benefits. And that can help to not only those interventions increase sponge function and surface water, groundwater connections, but also decrease mobilisation of pollutants and buffer watercourses. So we really feel that nature-based solutions is absolutely the core of what we need to do to help to give us that water security in the future. Next slide, please, Kylie. So what we're doing, our approach is both top down but bottom up, and through that we hope we can instigate this change that we need to see. So as you see on the left, we've got a top-down approach to ensuring we've got a really good business case, we've got the evidence, we've done the modelling, and we've identified the funding sources for implementation. On the right, we've also got a bottom-up approach. So we've actually starting a pipeline of pilot projects that will hopefully demonstrate the effectiveness of the approaches, work through the practicality of implementation, and we've secured funding for that feasibility. So if we get to the next slide, I can just start running you through some of the things that we've been doing. So we've identified nature-based solutions opportunity mapping. So this is sort of broadly the catchment of the Broads. So we've actually been able to identify where the best interventions could have the most effect. And that data set is going to be openly accessible. Next slide, please, Kylie. And as you can see, if you really zoom in on that, you can really start to see where you can make change happen. We've actually used some of this within our local nature recovery strategy. So I'm really excited because we'll not only have the local nature recovery strategy, but also these nature-based solution opportunity mapping, which will hopefully really show the potential of where these interventions can start to make a difference for nature and water. Next slide, please, Kylie. And we just completed this floodplain reconnection project on the River Yare last year. It was delivered by Norfolk Rivers Trust with one of the internal drainage boards and has been blended funding from a range of partners. The landowner is actually really willing to show that use this is a demonstration for other landowners in the area. So we're really excited that the Environment Agency is actually funding Norfolk Rivers Trust to do further landowner engagement within the Upper Yare, which could lead to other opportunities. So I think that's a really amazing project that can now demonstrate for others. Next slide, please, Kylie. So just in case you need to find out more information, please do visit the Water Resources East website. You can see the QR code there. There's lots of information. You can find the full business case, etc., etc. So really happy to share that with you. So next slide, please, Kylie. So a little bit of different approach and focus, and this is basically an initiative and a partnership that is looking at how you manage flooding and coastal risk for the Broads National Park and the Broads catchment for the next 100 years. So again, most of the land, as you can see on the right, is at flood risk or below current sea levels. And if you haven't been to the Broads, it's a national park, a really important wetland national park, and is just bursting with lots of habitats and rare species, and is a wonderful place. But with the challenges of sea level, we're not going to have the Broads that we've got today in the next 100 years. So we need to really work as a partnership and with those communities to work out what are the best approaches for managing this huge area with all those challenges that we face. Next slide, please, Kylie. So the Broadland Futures Initiative, as I said, it's a partnership looking at future risk, 100 years, and will encompass the Broads, Great Yarmouth, which is a coastal town in a very low-lying area of our county and our country. What we want to do is aim to improve the resilience to people, place, and the environment, flooding, as we adapt to climate change. And we're doing that by agreeing a framework and a plan for future flood risk management that adapts to climate change and sea level rise. So we are in the early phases of this. There's lots of modelling going on and investigations and studies, but at some point we'll need to start to work out what options we have, engaging with communities, politicians and stakeholders around that, but also to apply an adaptive pathways approach to how do we manage those options in the longer term. Next slide, please, Kylie. And finally, I won't read all these out, but we have done quite a lot of work with, as I said, with communities, with stakeholders, with the Broads authorities and politicians to say what matters most to you. And that's really important to guide us through this strategy. So we've got everything from cultural heritage, built environment, healthy waters, natural capital, sustainable agriculture, recreation, it's a very important recreation area, etc. So I think that's another example of how the County Council is working in partnership to really help us to navigate resilience and adaptation in place. So just the last slide, please, Kylie. Just to say, really, for us, water is absolutely the heart of placemaking, because if we just ignore it, we will not be able to deliver the services we need to our communities, and we need to work with communities to ask them, you know, how we adapt and make those services more resilient to them and their places where they live. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Wendy. Really interesting, that water at the heart of placemaking. Really interesting perspective and great to hear what you're doing there. And yes, I did know where Norfolk was. I'm sure most people do. And it's a very beautiful place. I used to live over there, so know exactly what you're talking about. But I'm sure most people do as well. So thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move into the panel discussion, if that's all right. But first, I'm going to introduce, so welcome all our speakers back. But I'm also going to introduce Paul Schaefer. He's Director of Projects at CIWEM. He's been involved in the water sector for around 25 years, championing nature-based solutions, integrated water management and flood resilience, and his focus is on providing guidance and support in the delivery of good practice. So welcome to you, Paul, as well, to join our panel. Now, you've been busy putting questions in the Q&A. Thank you very much. Add more as they come to you. So let's get through those. Now, one that I wanted to come to first was very much around the funding. And there are a couple of questions there around investment. How do we really, both bring government to the right place, and what are the key drivers for them to really understand and invest in this area? And equally, that other aspect that's even, and we've heard there, Wendy, about some of the partners that you've involved in your projects in Norfolk, and the community work, Angela, you're doing, etc. But how do we bring those other potential investors, the private sectors, the developers, the landowners, how do we get them to really engage in this agenda and maximise it? Because I think, Angela, I heard you mention you had your project, you had 6.6 million over 6 years. A lot of money, but still nowhere near what we could need to, what's needed in order to really begin to make an impact. So your thoughts on how do we bring the government to the table more, and how do we get all those others potentially to come to the table as well? Who'd like to go first? Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I mean, I think this is one of the challenges for us, isn't it? There's never enough money, resources, capacity. And actually, because we're very ambitious for our communities and our environment, we want to do the best with often very little resource. I think just a couple of observations from me. Government works in silos. And we're being told that that is going to change, and we're going to get more single integrated settlements and less competition. That might help, but certainly we find that working with different government departments, even MHCLG, DEFRA, they don't necessarily talk to each other, and therefore we're having to do that integration and joining up, and that's can take quite a lot of effort as well, and take in different funding sources. But I do think the private sector has a greater role to play. What we're doing, creating resilient places and adaptation, is creating stronger economy and making our economy more resilient. I don't think we talk about that enough in place. I don't think we recognise the importance of what we do in supporting businesses to thrive. So I think there's definitely a task for us to bring the business sector. I'm not saying all, I'm not generalising, but bring the business sector alongside. And maybe there is an opportunity through devolution. I know there was a question about devolution, but actually we should be exploring that. What does devolution mean in terms of deepening the devolution, widening it, and looking for additional powers and funding, and how do we bring that together? Because climate adaptation is not cheap, and the infrastructure that's required, never mind taking the communities and engagement and behaviour change with you, is really challenging. Thank you.
No, absolutely. So, well done for answering a couple of questions there, Angela. No, thanks on that. Wendy, yes.
Okay, I'll try and sort of answer this as best I can. So, interestingly, through the Norfolk Water Strategy Programme, because I think we're working with a sort of different partnership, International Conservation Organisation. They are talking to global investors. So actually, we've been able to get investment into that programme from somebody that if it was just me, I would never ever have that opportunity to engage with that investor. So I think it's all about partnerships you have and the influence you're drawing in through those partnerships. I think in terms of I think you're right, Angela, adaptation is really it's expensive, and I don't think it's really built into current government thinking or funding. So for example, on the Broads, whilst we haven't yet got there in terms of, well, these are the options and this is going to be how much it will cost, it's going to cost probably billions. Now, if you go through the normal funding formula to go, well, how do we pay for this? It's just not going to work. So I think there are going to be some places that government will need to pay attention to and go, if you want to protect this very special place with its very special nature, as well as the people and their lives within it, even though that place will have to change, how are we paying for that adaptation? Because it won't all be about protecting people. And I think that's what the old mindset is. When we need to move into, well, how is government going to help us to fund that resilience and adaptation in place? So I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that one either. Paul, do you have anything for your perspective to add into that one?
I suppose for me is really around trying to work out who are the potential beneficiaries in this and align those beneficiaries with that multiple benefit approach that I think Wendy and Angela were talking about, really, is that partners will come to the party when they can see there's an opportunity for them to get a benefit, whether that's building houses or whether that's making sure their supply chain is more resilient. They will then be more eager to be able to part with funding and investment in that they can more readily see what's in it for them. So I think it's really about that opportunity that resilience and water resilience gives, really, because it's quite complex in terms of the challenges around water, too much water, too little, and it being dirty. But within there's a breadth of benefits that you hopefully will be able to find some beneficiaries that will be willing to invest.
Thanks very much. No, to your point there, and as Angela said, it's those wider outcomes, articulating those, and pinpointing them. Who's a player in the game, isn't it? Okay, it was mentioned, I think it was Angela, about silos in central government. However, at local government level, we're not immune to that either. And there is a question there around about within your own authority, often things like climate resilience, adaptation, even environment agenda kind of gets left behind because it's so cross-cutting. Actually, it falls between the gaps. Any thoughts or tips about how we crack that one, or have you cracked that one? I guess this one again is for Wendy and Angela, thinking about your own authorities. Any tips or thoughts on how we get over that? It's a challenge. Angela?
Yeah, happy to go first again on this one, because this one we are actually, I think, making some good progress. With the climate risk assessment data, we're now moving into a cross-cutting approach on climate adaptation, bringing several senior managers and leaders together across the council to actually firstly get to understand what the data means, understand what action could be taken and when, over quite a long period, I have to say, and then bringing that and cascading that down into the organisation. And then it's a bottom up and a top down, if that makes sense, in terms of ideas, innovation coming through. But it's owned on a council-wide approach. So I saw a document recently that said I was the lead for climate adaptation. No, I'm not. Well, I might be, but this is actually not a Thriving Places piece of work. This is an organisation piece of work. It's just as much of involvement in public health, under adults, children's, our colleagues in Thriving Communities. So I think it's getting that over ownership in any way that you work in partnership and collaboration outside of the organisation, applying the same. It's not easy, again, and some people have said, what's this got to do with me? And I just sort of remind people that actually, we're often designing and thinking about the future world of work, how we're going to work in the future, use of AI, innovation. We should absolutely be putting climate adaptation also at the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about services. We can't work in short-termism in reactive way. We have to plan ahead. And I have to say, we're getting some real good traction. We've got a great session planned, a very interactive session, and we're bringing in some young people into those sessions as well to try and get some of that hearts and minds. But make it organisational wide, not department or service level.
Yeah, no, good one, Angela. Sounds really positive way forward. Wendy.
Yeah, golly, that sounds, we're opposite sides of the country, but that sounds really familiar, Angela. So we do have a climate strategy, and that is led by our chief executive, and it involves all sort of directors of service across the organisation. So I do feel there's really good engagement and buy-in for climate. I think I am seen as the nominal lead for resilience and adaptation, because I think I'm the one keep going, what about adaptation and resilience? Hello, it's not all about mitigation. So but I do feel we've got a really collegiate approach to climate. I would say, interestingly, the Norfolk Water Strategy Programme, that was kicked off before I joined the organisation, by our Director of Growth. So actually, I'm the sort of nominal head for it, but it's the Director of Growth that sees the real importance of this. So there is that really good understanding of actually our local economy is ultimately linked to the quality of our environment. But it is a bit, you do have to, it's not easy. You still have to work very hard at those internal relationships.
Yeah, no, thanks. Anything to add, Paul? Or I think that's more actually probably a local authority, isn't it? An experience there about how we do challenge and get that cross-cutting leadership. But no, interesting point there, Wendy, about that. That high-level senior champion as well, I think is really important, isn't it?
And if I could just jump in there as well. So I think you're absolutely right. Trying to break down those internal silos within authority can be challenging. But there's something to do about the language as well, making sure that there's a common language or language that people can associate to and with, because adaptation is a bit unfriendly term, I think. And if you talk about resilience, or in the case of highways, which I've been doing some work with some of our member authorities, if you talk about a bridge being washed away, and that's because of changing climates, they get that it's just all to do with the language and how it's presented. And we're doing some work to help produce things like toolkits around how to make certainly highways infrastructure more resilient. But it is definitely a slow burn. It's a behavioural change thing for me as much as anything else. And it will take a bit of while for it to become more embedded into structures. But it absolutely is essential. So a really important thing. Good question to ask. Thanks.
No, thanks. Behaviour change, absolutely. Hearts and minds is the key to this one, isn't it? Okay, there's a question there. It's about evidence and modelling output. What would you wish you could have that you don't have to answer emerging questions? I'm going to widen it out. What data, what gaps have you got? And then there was something was mentioned earlier about AI and tech. Things are progressing at 100 miles an hour. How are we making sure, or how are you making sure that actually we're maximising that opportunity and we're not missing chances that could really help us with the resilience and adaptation challenge we have? And one final point to it, how are you measuring performance? How do we do that to show that we're moving in the right direction? So what's missing in the data? How are we capturing the advancement of technology, etc.? And how are we measuring performance? Sorry, a big one, I know. Any volunteers before I pick somebody?
I don't mind giving it a go on this one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting question in a way, because I think we're still getting to grips and grappling with data sources, who owns it, where we share it, how we share it, and then how we use that data. And there's certainly data and insights who are maybe slightly behind in some ways, but actually because we've commissioned a piece of work through the climate risk assessment using the university and other partners to support us on that, it's like, actually, it's not my area of expertise, but knowing where to go to get that expertise and absolutely maximizing the use of the data to then measure your success. I mean, how do we know what success looks like over long periods, particularly because it's a short burn? You can't invest in something on climate adaptation and expect to see the results tomorrow. It's not that straightforward. I think one of the things that we've done is had two separate plans. There's a climate risk, climate change action plan, and then we've got a climate adaptation plan. And the adaptation plan is taking it that bit further into the data, the evidence, starting with the evidence and intelligence, and then moving that forward into actually what does that really mean for us on risk, and thinking about risks as well. What's our appetite for risk as a local authority? So I don't, it's a difficult one to answer, but I would say is tap into the sources and your experts on data right across partners, because when we'd asked that question, we understood that there was lots of people holding data, particularly on the water side, I have to say. They hold that data, let's utilize it and then bring that together. But it's definitely work in progress for us.
Okay, fab, thanks. Wendy, any thoughts?
Yeah, wow, what a question. What I'd really love, and I think there's lots of data out there, but I think it's sort of quite siloed, is actually could we really understand what the climate will mean to all our services and in place? Now that's really complicated, because when I was talking about the Broad Futures Initiative, well, we're going to have lots of options, and it will be the appetite of communities and politicians about which options we pick, and they will have very different effects on place and resilience of that place. So it's a really complex world we live in with some really complex decisions, and I just think we need help with navigating that. That's what I feel is sort of missing. And I agree, you know, I've been working in adaptation for a long time. It's really hard to know what you're monitoring and what success looks like, but I think that's the strength of something like adaptation pathways, because you can set some trigger points in there and you can start to navigate through, but we only do that. That's hard enough to do just on a flood risk strategy, let alone, you know, across a council and all the services we need to provide.
Yeah, and just echoing one of your points, you're saying really understand the impact on the services. There was a comment in the the Q&A part really about, the cost is ultimately the cost of not doing anything on our services, isn't it, in our communities? Yeah. So, really beginning to understand that, although it is challenging, isn't it? Yeah. Hannah, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to think about the data point actually, and people will probably be aware the government's consulting on a land use framework. And that the whole basis of that framework is coming out of data, and how it will inform how you develop a framework, where you want to build houses, where you want to put infrastructure, how you want to save areas for wildlife conservation, whatever it might be. So there is something in that data conversation, understanding what you've got and making better use of it, because I think, as Wendy said, authorities have got shed loads of data, but what they do with it is obviously the critical point, and how you analyze it and use what it tells you. But it's just, what I'm trying to say is there are lots of other strategies under development at the moment, so it's making sure you connect them all. And certainly within ADEPT, one concept we've been promoting is this: the government has its environmental improvement plan. What we want to see is a local version of that, a local environmental improvement plan, which would knit together all of these strategies, including climate change strategies, with that place focus, which is what we've been talking about. Everything needs to be embedded in a place. So data is critical to delivering all of that. Thanks.
No, thanks, Hannah. Useful. And Paul?
Yeah, thanks. So just building on that, I think there's an awful lot of data out there, and it's also quite expensive to get some of that data and that modeling. So I think what we probably need to focus on is around action, and certainly around modelling flood risk and delivering some of those interventions. There can sometimes lots more money is actually spent on modelling a relatively low regret or no regret intervention than it's actually spent on the capital delivery. And then so for me, it's really about proportionality and trying to work out what data is required and in what circumstance should you be satisfied that this is going to be a low or no regret measure, and that actually to go forward. And there's also an element here around making sure that the data underpins the messages in the right way for the different audiences when you're trying to unlock partnership funding. So if I was to probably say where would we want to focus effort in terms of getting data, it's more around trying to make sure we understand the value and benefit of what we're doing, because there's so much time spent on trying to work out the cost of these things. There's not enough time spent on the value of those interventions. So for me, it's about proportionality and also making sure we understand the value as much as we do about the cost of some of these interventions.
Yeah, good points. Thank you for that, Paul. And Hannah?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. So one thing I just wanted to add is the need for sharing between lots of brilliant work that's going on all around the country. We've heard some excellent examples today from Norfolk and from Cumbria. I'm aware of many, many more where there are organisations coming together to share vast data sets. One of the challenges is with each organisation having different roles and responsibilities, and to some extent their own silo, who is responsible overall for coordinating that data and making the overall decisions in the best interest of the water environment. So I think that's something that we need to address as a nation as well.
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. Funny, I was at an event yesterday, not to do with this, it was a transport event, and the number of times I came back to, we need to get much better at sharing best practice. There's lots of pockets of really good practice, but actually as sectors, we're not brilliant at looking across the piece and really learning and therefore fast tracking how we're going. So I absolutely agree with your point there. Hannah, thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. And now that we've obviously cracked water and flooding, how are we going to get the other climate hazards and impacts into the mainstream when we're considering placemaking? Heat, we've all had that, haven't we? A couple of years ago, we had heat waves, water scarcity, particular one for the east of England and Norfolk, I know, I remember from my days being over there, wildfire, impacts on species, etc. So how are we going to mainstream and deal with those? Any thoughts? Wendy, you'll start. Maybe we were over there in the
well, obviously, we've got the water strategy programme, so we are trying to look at water scarcity, but I also think the local nature recovery is going to have strategy is going to have a really important role. So we have been looking at things like heat and some of the measures we can carry out in our urban areas, particularly sort of tree cover, but other sort of natural interventions that can help to manage heat. So I think that's a really important one. Water, we know, is a big one that we're tackling. Wildfires, we did have wildfires. I must say, I've not even got there. I think there's many like big stuff going, oh, look at me. So I'm not sure I've got an answer for wildfires. Thanks, Sam.
Just on that, sorry, and before I bring the others in, there was another question I'm just going to weave into that, because they were just wondering how all this fits with the enhanced biodiversity duty now that applies to all local authorities. You mentioned the local nature recovery strategy delivery on that aspect. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
in terms of biodiversity duty, and we've got the reporting requirements.
Looking at our biodiversity duty at the moment, and I think we're also developing a sort of revised environment strategy. But I think it's that commitment from the county council to deliver the strategy, because I think there's been an awful lot of emphasis on producing them, but actually delivery for me is the most important bit. So we want to see that commitment through our enhanced biodiversity duty to actually convene and continue to convene the partnership, which is on my logo, across Norfolk and Suffolk, actually, to actually really drive delivery. Because I think unless we do that, we're not going to see that step change in biodiversity improvement that we need.
Okay, no, brilliant, thanks. And Paul, I think you might have been first, but
Yeah, so thanks. I think it really builds on the presentations from Angela and Wendy around the value and the beauty of nature-based solutions, in as much that they do, using nature to solve some of these challenges, do deliver multiple benefits in terms of in recharging aquifers, managing flood risk, and certainly in urban areas, when you think about sustainable drainage and spun cities, the massive opportunity that there is around SUDS for delivering biodiversity, better health and well-being, and providing opportunities around thermal comfort. So I think it's really about, if you attach an approach that looks at these multiple benefits, you can actually start breaking down those silos and also being able to find multiple funding pots to deliver those outcomes and the nature-based solutions.
brilliant, thanks. And Angela?
Yeah, I'd agree with Wendy and Paul, to make it simple. But I do think thinking about them not as separate interventions or activity. So LNRS, BNG, nutrient neutrality, water resources, how you manage all of that complex web, but knitting it together. And that's one of my favorite phrases that somebody said to me last week. How are you knitting all that together? And I think that is really important, though, that you know, we do look at that, because if you look at the heart of BNG, actually climate adaptation is fundamental to biodiversity net gain outcomes. Working with developers, thinking about our obligations as authority on that, just as much as how do we ensure that happens right across in a place in development. But I'm with Wendy and Paul. I think I think this opportunity comes from those multiple benefits. But again, bring your best people together. You know, we're starting to look at setting up an SPV for nature, habitat banking, as well as brokerage, and we're looking at the nutrient neutrality and the BNG, because in Cumbria we've got a huge nutrient neutrality problem here, with over 4,000 houses stalled and just one catchment area. So use your experts, your subject matter experts, and just think about all of those not as separate interventions and policies, but try and bring that together under one umbrella.
Fab. No, thanks very much. And you mentioned nutrient neutrality. There is a question there, and it's directed at Norfolk, but I'm going to put it to the panel. It says, what's Norfolk's view of government's proposals to unblock housing development in nutrient neutrality areas by moving to strategic rather than site-specific mitigation? Any of you? Wendy?
Yeah, we have responded to that government review. So whilst I think we do need a different approach to nutrient neutrality, and I've been saying this for a while, I think we need a more strategic approach. I've got some concerns about government's current approach. I'm not sure it really gives us the tools that we need to make it work. Because they've said things like, well, just do compulsory purchase. Now, if anybody's ever come across the compulsory purchase or tried to use it in their organisation, you will know it is not the easy tool to use, and there will always be an alternative argument to where you might want to do an intervention. I think it could work if it happens really in advance of the loss, and I think that's the problem. We can't just sort of go, no, this is put money into a fund and let development happen, because you'll be losing biodiversity. We know some habitats will take years to come to that maturity in terms of the needs of certain species as well. So I've got my concerns, but I do think we need a different approach to the current one.
Okay, brilliant. Listen, we're on time then. I'd wanted to get one more sneaky question in, but we're actually on time. So I'm going to finish there and conclude by thanking Hannah, Angela, Wendy and Paul. Thank you ever so much for your contributions. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you to CIWEM and to ADEPT for hosting this and putting this on. I'm sure you agree it really was a worthwhile conversation, and I'm sure we'll come back to it again because we've got a long way to go on this one. Thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you very much for your attendance and your questions. Thanks all.